Hello, Salem, and welcome to CC Media Presents Our Community Matters. I'm your host, Evan Remington. On today's show, we chat with the City of Salem Mayor, Chris Hoy, and City Manager, Keith Stahley, both of whom have been in their new roles for several months and are optimistic about Salem's short-term and long-term future. First, I'd like to come and welcome Chris Hoy, who was elected mayor last spring and took office on November 2nd, 2022. He was appointed a couple months earlier by the Salem City Council when Mayor Chuck Bennett stepped down. Mayor Hoy's term officially began in January 2023, and he previously served as city councilor for Ward 6 since 2017. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you and other newly elected mayors around the country were able to meet with the president and senior cabinet officials in December. You were also part of the program for new mayors at Harvard. First of all, can you tell us a little bit about what that is, the program for new mayors, and what have you found to be the most helpful at these meetings?
Sure. The program at Harvard, which was there at Cambridge, which was my first time to be able to visit there. I was there with, I think, 24 other newly elected mayors from around the country, and it was cities of a population. There was a threshold. I can't remember what the threshold was exactly, but I think it was 75,000 people and above. So I got to talk with the folks from all over the country who are new to their positions or were going to be taking office in January. And Harvard partners with Bloomberg Philanthropies and puts on a program to basically help mayors prepare for their first 100 days. Because the idea is that where the real work happens in this country is at the city level. And they want mayors to be as effective as possible. So it's totally nonpartisan. It doesn't matter what your political background is. They invite all newly elected mayors, I think, who reach that population threshold. And for me, the best part about the whole trip was just getting to interact with, and I've developed friendships now with mayors from all over. The mayor of Oakland, California, for instance, the mayor from Louisville, Kentucky. I mean, from all over the country. And it was a great opportunity to just meet people and learn about issues that are happening throughout the country that are very similar to the things we're doing here. The number one takeaway from the actual curriculum for me was really time management. We really focused on time management. And since our program at the end of November, first part of December, we've had follow-up Zoom meetings every couple of weeks. And so we've really focused on our scheduling and how to take control of our calendar and not let our calendar control us, which can really happen, as I've found in my first several weeks as mayor. You know, your calendar can really take over your life if you let it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so interesting you mentioned the calendar, because I just had a meeting with my organization where I said, okay, no more 1 hour defaults for calendar invites, yes. Right? Because then you just sort of take up the time of an hour regardless of whether it's really needed for the subject matter or not. So that's interesting.
Definitely, and it's one of the things that in the city we tend to have longer meetings. You know, when I was a state representative for a year, and the default time for a state rep meeting is 15 minutes. You get 15 minutes. You know,
keeps you focused.
Very much so, and so I often want shorter meetings rather than longer meetings. Yeah. If I got a meeting on my calendar that's more than an hour, the staff is probably going to be getting a question from me like, why do we need this much time?
Yeah. Well, that's great. I'm so glad that you participated in that. That seems like a really great opportunity for you and for Salem.
It was really amazing. And then the second part of your question was about the trip to the White House. It was, I got to meet with several cabinet secretaries who are all former mayors. So Mayor Pete Buttigieg, also with the Labor Secretary, Marty Walsh, who's the former mayor of Boston, and also Marcia Fudge, the HUD Secretary, who is a former mayor of a city in Ohio. And so President Biden really emphasized when we spoke with him about, again, kind of that theme of problems are solved at the city level. Mm-hmm. And so he really wanted to make sure that we had solid partnerships, and so we could talk with his cabinet members about issues that are important to the our cities and which ultimately are important to him as well. So it was being in the Oval Office and spending time with the president was pretty amazing.
That's thrilling, yeah. Well, that's great. Well, you certainly had to hit the ground running, because the week after you took office, the $300 million Salem infrastructure bond measure was passed overwhelmingly by voters, which is exciting, I'm sure.
Really exciting.
So affordable housing will receive funding from part of the bond, part of the 17.5 million. Can you help us understand what you mean when you talk about affordable housing, and also how might this help our unsheltered neighbors?
Sure, that's a not an uncommon question, because sometimes people say when we talk about affordable housing and that people don't really necessarily know what we mean. When I say affordable housing, I mean that meets the HUD definition of affordability, which means it's a certain people with a certain percentage of income. It's a percentage of the average median income or the area median income is what we're talking about. So it could be at 80, 60, or 40. There are varying degrees of affordability, and so that's what I'm talking about. It's an actual income level as compared to the area median income.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So, we need housing in Salem at all levels. We need affordable housing, we need workforce housing, we need higher end housing, because we have a housing crunch at all levels. And what happens when you're in that situation, when our inventory is so low, is that people at the bottom end of that are the ones who end up suffering the most. They can't find housing because people who could afford more that can't necessarily find housing that's available, and so everybody kind of goes down the in terms of a price point where they can afford, and so the people at the bottom are the ones who often suffer the most.
Yeah. Is there anything else maybe outside of the bond? Just because I know it's top of mind for everybody as far as the our unsheltered neighbors and what it is we're doing about that. Do you have a little update for us on what you're working on in that regard?
Sure. The thing I spend the most of my time as mayor on is our homeless situation. It is, it's been the number one priority for Salem residents for a number of years. It's certainly been my number one priority. I serve as the vice chair of the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance. We take a regional approach to tackling that problem. We work with Marion County, Polk County, Kaiser, Independence, Monmouth, the school district, the tribes, local nonprofits to really tackle this at a regional level, so people aren't falling through any gaps in the system. We have our new navigation centers coming online in a few weeks, which will be a low barrier shelter over off of Mission. It'll be really the first low barrier shelter in the city of Salem for men, at least. We already have one for women, but we don't really have a low barrier shelter for men. So I'm really excited about that. We have another permanent supportive housing project coming online in a few weeks over at Yaquina Hall, which is on the north campus of the state hospital. We bought the old nurses' quarters and we have revitalized it, and it's going to be a great place. 52 units, single occupancy, and I think 25 of those are going to be for people with serious and persistent mental illness, which is a huge need that we have as a place for people who are suffering from mental illness to have a place to live with the supports around them that they need to be successful. So those are some of the things we have going on. We're getting ready to open another micro-shelter community. This one is going to be out on Turner Road, and it's focused on Turner Road, and it's focused on youth 17 to 24-year-olds, which is a really huge area that we're trying to focus on. Folks who are, kids who are homeless, they kind of have an extra challenge to deal with, in that they're often not welcome by adults in camps and stuff, because they're afraid that might draw unwanted attention to what they're doing, and so it's like an extra challenge for young folks. So we're really excited to be getting that program online. It will also have wraparound services through a HUD grant that's going to help us really provide some great services and resources for youth that we've never been able to do.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So back to the bond for a moment. Another $157 million of the bond is earmarked for streets and sidewalks.
Yep.
Can you remind us again, you talked about it last time, but just remind us what we can expect to see over the next decade with this funding?
Yeah, you can expect to see so much throughout the entire city. Probably the first project that you're going to be able to really visualize is McGilchrist. So we got some federal funds in addition to our bond funds, and we're going to be starting the work on McGilchrist to really upgrade that to an urban standard. Right now, it's just pavement with 2 ditches on the side of the road. Basically, it's not safe for pedestrians or people on bikes or anything. And if you remember, that's where our veterans office is, and also Social Security. So it's really important for people to be able to get there via the bus. And right now, it's really not easy to do. So this is going to be a huge upgrade. We're going to do some realignments out there. So that's the first one. You'll probably, first biggest project you'll notice, we're going to build Marine Drive over in West Salem, which is going to be a great connector for the local folks there between the river and Wallace Road, which is going to help folks a lot. And then we have upgrades coming out on Fisher Road, Davis Road, all over town, where we have some pretty significant upgrades coming. You'll see pavement rehabilitation coming to areas that really need it. Some of our, if you go on Center Street or Commercial Street, Southeast, you'll notice that there's some pavement really needing some help. And so this bond is really going to help us give some needed attention to some of those areas.
That's great. It's exciting.
Yeah.
So the City Council also unanimously voted in January to move forward with spending on airport upgrades, which puts Salem Municipal Airport on approach for starting commercial air service this fall. You had mentioned in the hearing that you see Salem transitioning from a small town to a bigger city, and you said that we're coming of age.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that?
Yeah, thank you for asking about that. It was something I hadn't really thought about it ahead of time. It's just something that kind of came to me during that conversation, but I really think it's true. We are the second largest city in Oregon by both area and population, which people often don't realize. They often think, oh, it's Eugene. Spoiler alert, it's not Eugene. It's us. And so, but we really have a small town feel, which I think everybody really loves, and certainly we want to maintain. But yet, we also are ready to transition into what I call more of a grown-up feel, like with some really great restaurants. I mean, we have some amazing restaurants here. We have, it used to be you go to downtown in the evening and not much was happening. Well, now you go downtown and it is alive, and I just want to see more and more of that. Yeah. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Commercial air service, I think, people are skeptical because it wasn't successful in the past, but there was a different time in Salem. It was a different time with the economy. I really feel like, especially with the markets that people are going to be able to fly to, now is the time. And we're the largest state capital in the country without commercial air service. I mean, and so I think, especially being kind of the heart of wine country, this is going to be a great opportunity. And I know that not everybody's super excited about it, but I think this is going to be great. And I'm really, really, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. So by the end of your first term, where do you hope to see Salem?
Well, my term is only 2 years long, which is crazy short. So, but I really want to see our downtown thriving. We have great work happening at the old Union Gospel Mission site. We've got a new hotel opening downtown. I really want to see our downtown just thriving even more, and I want to see a bunch of those bond projects really in process, and so people can see that there's a tangible result from that confidence that they put in the city with that vote in November. So they can see some of the parks being upgraded, some of the streets being fixed that we've been wanting to, and delivering on the promises that we made and we fully intend to keep.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else that I didn't ask that maybe I should have that you might want to update us on?
There are so many things happening in Salem. There's nothing specifically. It's a great time to be the mayor, and I am really honored to be able to serve as the mayor of Salem.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Mayor Hoy. We appreciate your time and your transparency. I think this is a fabulous way for our citizens to kind of get caught up and hear about what's happening in our city. It's an exciting time, and I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming, and I hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to it.
We'll be back in a moment to talk with our city manager.
Hey Luis, TV isn't the only thing we do at CC Media.
Really? TV is everything in the Capital Community Media.
Not anymore. We're launching a brand new radio station, 98.3 FM.
Whoa, that's so cool. I'm going to check it out right now.
You're listening to KMWB 98.3 FM, your community radio station for the Mid-Willamette Valley.
Welcome back to CC Media Presents Our Community Matters. I'm Evan Remington. With more than 30 years of local government experience, Keith Stahley was chosen as Salem's new city manager last year. He stepped into the role on September 12th, 2022, following his service as Olympia, Washington's assistant city manager. Prior to that, he spent 14 years as Olympia's community planning and development director. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Evan.
Yeah, it's good to meet you, and I know everybody else in Salem is interested in hearing from you as well. Not everyone understands what the role of city manager is. It's not a political position, but it carries a great deal of responsibility, as you know. Can you talk about what it is you do and how this role works within our form of government here in Salem?
Sure. Thank you for that. The city manager, council manager form of government has been in a form of government in the United States since about 1906. It slowly has been expanding over the time, and the city of Salem adopted the council manager form of government in 1946. So it's been here for a very long time. At least that feels like a long time to me. The city manager is the day-to-day manager of the operations of the city. So as we prepare for a snow event, for example, I'm part of that decision-making, helping to staff determine how are we moving forward. I also support City Council in their day-to-day operations in how do they implement their policy agenda and provide the policy direction to the city. So those are really my two roles, helping council be successful in their policy arena and helping staff be successful from an operational perspective.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then, of course, there's the Salem community is another facet of a relationship. How do you, building trust with the community is an important part of your job. How do you do that?
Oh, that's interesting that you would ask that question. A couple weeks ago, we had a leadership team retreat. And by leadership team, I mean basically all of the department heads in the city, the police chief, the fire chief, the public works director, our enterprise services director, the city attorney, and others. And I opened that meeting about talking about how we build trust in the community. And for me, it's a virtuous cycle. Basically, treating our employees well and building trust with our employees allows them to have the confidence and capability to deliver great customer service, which engenders support and trust in the community as we go forward and ask for their support for things like bond measures and additional revenues. And it creates what I'd like to call a virtuous cycle. So I think it really starts with having extraordinary employees who are committed to their work and who are working in a trusting relationship with their managers and department heads and understand what the mission and the vision and values of the city are. And then that in turn translates into supporting the community and trust in the community.
That's great. You mentioned revenue. So you're currently working on the 2024 fiscal year budget. That'll be proposed in mid-April to the Budget Committee. How do you plan for the future, creating a sustainable revenue stream for the infrastructure and city services?
Well, Council has 4 priority areas right now. We adopt a Council priority agenda every year, and basically this year is the same as last year, and that's engaging our community, planning for our future, and building a sustainable platform for infrastructure and services. So I'm focused in on building that sustainable platform for infrastructure and services. We did the first plank of that platform with the $300 million bond measure that passed in November. The second plank of that is securing our revenue future so that we can provide the services that are necessary to meet a growing community's needs. Things like expanding our fire department and police department and our parks and rec services and facilities to meet the growing demands of our community.
And can you talk a little bit more about how you develop or where you're looking for a sustainable revenue stream to support those services?
Well, in 2018, the city of Salem had a task force that looked at those questions pretty deeply. They looked at the various options that are available to the city of Salem to do that, and we're basically bringing those options back to the council and to the budget committee and the community to get input about what is the best path forward.
Okay, and you talked about engagement also. What does that look like? How do you engage?
So it's a wide variety of things. It's things like this, having this conversation so that our community can understand where their city leadership is coming from, both the elected leadership and the appointed leadership is certainly part of that. But having a robust website, web presence is an incredibly important part of community engagement today. Building our neighborhood program and making connections through our neighborhood associations is another important means of connecting with our community. And just being out and about and being part of the community, for me, is how I build connections.
Yeah, absolutely. I expect you've done a lot of town halls or, speaking at different engagements just to kind of introduce yourself and get feedback.
I have, but I think the most powerful way to build connections is meeting with people one-on-one and then building from there. And just, before lunchtime, at lunch, I should say, I was meeting with a community member and building that relationship.
Yeah, that's good. So what is the measure of success for the city in your terms? How would you measure success? And how do you hope to see Salem in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, the city conducts a survey every year, basically a citizen satisfaction survey, and we ask the community how we're doing. And so that's one measure. But for me, the most telling measure thus far was on November 8th when our community passed the infrastructure bond measure by a 65% margin, 65 to in favor and 35 opposed. So for me, that was a significant and telling endorsement for where the city is and where we're going.
Yeah, absolutely. And so do you have any specific examples? I mean, just kind of those implementations that Mayor Hoy talked about of just the different changes that we're going to see with the bond. Is there anything else in particular that, you would hope that at the end of 3 to 5 years that we're actively seeing in Salem and that you would consider that a success for the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, sure. Obviously, moving forward with the construction projects that are included in the $300 million bond issue that's just a baseline for success. Literally today, we are paying for our fire equipment that was included in the $300 million bond measure. We are wiring the money, the $17 million, we are wiring that to Pierce fire equipment to secure our order for that fire equipment. So that's one measure. The other measure is the continuing support from our community for additional revenues and supporting our operations and recognizing the good work that we do on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, that's exciting. I was going to ask you that actually, just maybe it's a just ignorant question, but the actual management of the implementation, the project management, if you will, of just these different things that are going to be occurring with the bond, what was approved with the bond, does that fall under your purview as well?
Yeah, of course. Fortunately, as the city manager, I don't have to do all of the work. I have 1,350 qualified employees who are coming to work every day and doing the good work of the city. And one of those aspects of the work is planning for and implementing this bond measure. We will actually be hiring some additional engineering staff to help facilitate the project management for the bond measure. Literally each and every task becomes a project in and of itself. The mayor mentioned McGillcrest. That's a huge construction project, and will basically take one of our engineers full-time managing that process from design all the way through to completion of construction. So take each and every one of the projects that's in the bond measure, and basically every one of them has to be planned and bid and then executed, and that's what we'll be doing over the next 10 years.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that for many of us citizens, we just kind of pass a bond and we hope to see the outcome, and it's really exciting, but I feel like we could spend forever talking about, like you say, each one of these projects and what really is entailed in executing on those.
Exactly. Each one of the projects entails bringing a project engineer on board to do the design work, and then bidding the design work to bring on a contractor to construct it, letting the contract for construction, and then monitoring that throughout the construction process and making sure that the contractor delivers the specified construction. So yes, each and every one of those projects is complicated in its own right.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's fascinating, and I really appreciate your time. I know you have the rest of your day that you have to get on with, so I won't take more of your time. But I appreciate again your transparency. Same with Mayor Hoy. And I hope that perhaps we can talk to you further in the future and just get more in depth of some of these different projects, because it is really interesting.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it very much. We hope you found this conversation with the mayor and city manager insightful, and that you learned more about some of the issues the city is tackling and about the bright future ahead in Salem. Thank you for joining us, and remember, our community matters. We'll see you next time.